to the Family Caregiver Virtual Symposium 2020. I'm Daphne Bennear, a Program Coordinator here with the St. Mary's County Department of Aging and Human Services. I'm so glad that you are here with us today, and I hope that you're enjoying these sessions. I know that I have enjoyed the speakers, and I appreciate the time and the information that they've given us. And if you've gleaned something from these sessions, please comment below and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Today, Pastor Patricia Watson is going to speak to us about the spiritual aspects of caregiving and how to take care of your spiritual needs as you give care to a loved one. Pastor Watson has been a pastor at the First Saints Community Church since 2016 and a pastor in the United Methodist Church since 2007. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in Religious Studies from Elon University and a Master's of Divinity from Louisville Presbyterian Seminary. In her free time, she's currently pursuing a doctorate of ministry in pastoral care and counseling. She believes firmly in the importance of intentional community and works hard to form that in her family, in her local church, and in those around her. Her husband, White, and her have 3 lovely daughters and 2 fabulous grandchildren, of whom they're very proud. I know you're going to get a lot out of what Pastor Trish has to say today, so let's get started.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Pastor Trish, and I'm going to be sharing with you about spirituality and caregiving. Let me just say the obvious that everyone in the room is thinking and no one is saying. This sucks. Those were the first 2 lines of a eulogy that one of my parishioners read at her mother's funeral. It was one of the best and most honest eulogies I have ever heard. Her mother had been diagnosed with early onset dementia, and there were some very rough years where my parishioner, an only child, was caring for her mother and her grandparents, who weren't always well. She was a caregiver for all 3 of the adults who had cared for her as a child, even while she was caring for her 2 small children. I loved her honesty in being able to name exactly how the situation felt at the time. She didn't sugarcoat it. She did not use cliches or platitudes or look at it with a Pollyanna attitude. But she was also able to see and name the way her faith helped her. She told stories that day of nurses who would come in and say just the right thing at just the right time. She told of moments of peace and calm that seemed impossible to explain. And she shared memories of her mom and hopes for her children. But it was her honesty that caring for someone with an illness like dementia is tiring and awful much of the time, and her willingness to laugh at the parts in between that I loved most of all. It was in her honesty and her humor that she was able to connect with something greater than her own suffering. There are many spiritual aspects to being a caregiver. Many ways we can experience God in the midst of that work. Many ways we can be drawn closer. But there are also many questions that arise in the midst of that work. Studies show that caregivers who feel spiritually supported are less likely to burn out. So how do we do that? How do we nurture our own spirituality even while caring for someone we love? While spiritual care is not just important but vital, one of the last things I think we need as caregivers are spiritual platitudes or cliches. And sometimes there are spiritual things that are said to us as caregivers that ultimately make the situation worse. I'm sure each of you could give me examples, some that would make us laugh and some that would probably make us cry. So I just want you to know that my aim here today is to not make things worse. While writing this, I tried hard to think about who would be watching it. For some of you, I imagine your own faith or spirituality has been put on the back burner as the everyday demands of caring for someone else has taken over. There might be days or moments when you feel far from God, far from peace, and instead feel alone and isolated. There might be others of you who have come to view this act of caregiving as a spiritual vocation, and you have found the work drawing you closer to the faith or spirituality that brought you there. And the rest of us might find ourselves somewhere in between. So how can you, as a caregiver, focus on your spirituality in such a way that those needs are being met? The likelihood is that you can't do it the same way you did it before. Some of that is probably because of scheduling and availability. Part of that is because the paradigms that helped you before don't help you anymore. So you need to find a new thing. Living into the time of quarantine and isolation means all of us have to do things a little bit differently. And part of the gift of this season in our world is that more and more has become available to us virtually. So let me share with you just 4 tips that I think might help you nurture your spiritual life. First, create a ritual. Now those words can be a little bit scary, but what I mean is a routine. Most of our days are already driven by routine and repetition anyway. For example, in the morning, when my first alarm goes off, I go to my middle daughter's room. I first turn up the thermostat in the hallway because we like to be cold while we're sleeping, but not cold during the day. And then I turn off her fan, and then I turn off her radio, and then I turn on her light before waking her up. It is the same routine Monday through Friday in the exact same order. When we think of routine in terms of our spiritual lives, it's easy to assume that routine will eventually take the meaning away, but the opposite is true. Routines, rituals, can be the very things that hold us together. So this might mean for you spending 5 minutes of deep breathing in the morning before you get out of bed. It might mean reading a devotional or scripture with your coffee. It might mean repeating the same prayer every day or making sure you spend 5 minutes outside. Find something that connects you to what is beyond yourself, that is just for you. Second, tell your community what you need. Often we do not have because we do not ask. There is a gift in asking for help, not just for you, but for the one who gets to give to you. And it is this back and forth that makes community. Even in this time of quarantining and isolation, especially in this time, we need community. But we have to work to form that community for ourselves. Third, I invite you to connect your spirituality to the everyday. There's a book I really loved called Liturgy of the Ordinary. It's not specifically about caregiving, but in it, the author works to connect her everyday living, things like making her bed and brushing her teeth, with spiritual practices. In the foreword of the book, it says this: our bodies, our pleasures, our fears, our fatigue, our friendships, our fights, these are, in fact, the stuff of our formation and transformation into the frail but infinitely dignified creatures we were meant to be and shall become. As caregivers, you are even more so to be found in those everyday moments. Those moments of washing and feeding, of doctor's appointments and naps and medicines. What if your spirituality were connected to those everyday moments, the ordinary, and not just the ones you spend in a sanctuary or in worship? For example, as I do my daily routine of turning up the thermostat and turning off my daughter's fan and turning off my daughter's radio and turning on her light, what if I used each of those moments to say a prayer for her? This connects my morning ritual with my spiritual life. What if you used your morning routine of pouring coffee into your cup and stirring in the sugar to list 2 things for which you were thankful? In it, you are connecting the ordinary with the divine. My 4th tip is to find the humor, like my parishioner. That might seem like odd advice coming from a pastor, but I definitely think laughter can be healing and spiritual. Norman Cousins, was the first person to popularize the idea of laughter as the best medicine in 1979. But more recent and more scientific studies have also backed up that idea. A 2010 study done by the University of Oxford found that laughter triggers the release of endorphins, the same mood-boosting hormone that is produced by exercise and love and chocolate, and that it could increase an individual's pain threshold by as much as 10%. Similarly, a University of Maryland study from 2005 found that laughter increased blood flow by 22%. Laughter is connected to breath, and breath connects us to the divine. Laughter, much like tears, is a release. When tension builds and builds, it is laughter that can provide relief from that tension, even if only temporarily. One of my favorite podcasts is called The Hilarious World of Depression, and it looks at the intersection of mental health and humor. The creator of the podcast, John Moe, writes, "I think humor allows you to see the same world everybody else sees, but in a new way and a new perspective. And I think that's part of the grand intelligence of comedy. It can bust me out of seeing things in a depressive way, which might be my natural tendency. If I can make a joke about it, it becomes, in fact, a new world." I invite you to look for the things that make you laugh, for the things that give you a new perspective on your world. Caregiving can give us a better understanding of ourselves. It can build in us patience and compassion. It can connect our past and present and future. Caregiving can lead us in new directions and inspire us. But none of that takes away from the other parts of what caregiving can be: painful and exhausting and frustrating. But I also believe in the midst of all of that, we can become who we truly are by connecting with something greater than ourselves. My hope and prayer for you is that you can nurture your own spiritual needs, even as you care for your loved ones. Find ritual and meaning, community and humor, and may all of that give you life.
Thank you for attending this session of the Family Caregivers Virtual Symposium. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got lots of good information. Please comment and like and share with other people, with friends, with family, people that you think will benefit from this information. We want to get it out there and help other caregivers as well. I also want to remind you that the Department of Aging and Human Services has respite grant funding available. So if you're a caregiver and you need a break, a respite, we have funding that you may qualify for that can provide a professional caregiver in your home to allow you to have a break, to take a nap, take a walk, go to the grocery store, or whatever you need to do. So go ahead and get in contact with me, and we will try to get that information out to you. So remember to come back next week, because we're going to have another speaker. And if you have any questions or anything, please reach out to me at daphne.bennear@stmarysmd.com.